Welcome into Cincinnati Bengals Talk. I'm James Rapien. He is Paul Dehner Jr. of The Athletic. Make sure you check out his new podcast, The Growler, wherever you get your podcast, including right here on YouTube. Paul, I appreciate the time. It's draft season. You've looked at this. You've probably read word for word Dane Brugler's Beast draft guide by now.
Yeah.
I've searched already like 5,000 times, and it hasn't even been out that long. Just different things, just trying to get up to date with where Dane views these guys. Let's start with the Bengals' first round pick 18. Is it offensive tackle or bust? Because it sort of feels like the Bengals. I don't want to say they view it that way, but I think they know how important it would be to nail this offensive tackle pick if they can get the right guy at 18.
Yeah. I mean, the line I've been using a lot lately is just take what the draft gives you. And the draft is giving you a quality offensive tackle at a spot that the draft doesn't usually give you quality offensive tackles. And they all look like the kind you like, and that's the thing. And we've talked about them now for so long, but you can't get past it. Like, as much as you want to, as we get to this point in draft season where we're like, I kind of equate it. What are we in? We're in like, this would be like August 14th of training camp. We're deep in the dog days and you're not quite there yet, but you start talking yourself into different things, but it's hard for me to talk myself into too much else because it's so clear these guys that are big, that are powerful, that play right tackle, that they fit everything that the Bengals have wanted, a position that they need to build for the future. They've got it all set up for that. And they've kind of signaled it. So yeah, you can probably see a few other names that would make sense. And you never know what will happen, I guess, but it really feels like they have kind of set themselves up for it to end up there. Byron Murphy is certainly the one wild card in my mind beyond offensive tackle that I think that would make sense to me, just because it's so hard to find true game-changing, disruptive, three-technique type defensive tackles. It's so hard to find them outside of the first round. They never hit free agency. And if you have a chance to get one, and where does he fit in the middle of your list of offensive tackles is the question. If you chance at that, I think that's the one thing that could maybe disrupt it in my mind.
I'm not going to hold you to this, so it's not like I'm going to bring it back in 4 weeks or in 4 years if Byron Murphy is the one who gets picked and then he goes on to be an all-pro for the Bengals. But where is that line for you with Byron Murphy? Because I know people that think Byron Murphy should be number one on their board. Mm-hmm. And yet I think about Olu Fashanu, obviously Joe Alt, but Joe Alt won't be there. I think of Amarius Mims, who knows? Maybe the Bengals don't love Amarius Mims. I find it really hard to believe that they wouldn't love him because he's built like I don't even know, like how, like he's designed in a lab, 6'7", 340, and he's kind of shredded, which is really hard to do. I think there are so many tackles that they're going to JC Latham, but where would you rank them if it's you? If Duke Tobin says, Paul, you get to make the pick. I get it. We only have so much info, but where is Byron Murphy amongst that really group of 6 tackles that I think is in consideration at 18?
Yeah, he's in the middle. I mean, I think you're probably, I mean, for me, I would think, one thing I love about Fatanyu is the position flex. I love, the fact that he could bring them more than one thing. I mean, obviously he shows up and he can be your right tackle or whatever, but the 5 position flexibility as this line evolves over the next 4 years could truly be invaluable, right? And so I like him, not at the top, but I like him more than probably most for that fact. But yeah, I mean, I think Latham, Mims, they certainly make sense, throwing Alt and Fashanu, because I also, on my board for them, don't have those guys as high, not because they're not better players, just because I think we know how much Orlando Brown cares about being a left tackle, and those guys are left tackles. I don't know if you want to mess with that as much necessarily. I mean, they're willing to deal with the fallout if that were to happen, but I think that you really like the setup of the other guys, of Latham, of Mims, of Fatanyu, of Fuaga. I like all those, but I would put Murphy in the middle of those guys, because I just think that that can absolutely change games, and the value of that position, the top there, is getting so much. Whereas look at what the Bengals have been able to do at right tackle in recent years. They've found good value and more than, in serviceability, if not better, in free agency for middle prices. But you're not finding anything resembling what you'd like at defensive tackle for middle prices. And they're not finding any kind of a bargain there. You've got to take a real shot at it in the top of the draft. So I would put him in the middle of that group.
Is he the only defensive player? Do you have one of these corners, maybe Quinyon Mitchell, Terrion Arnold are the two for me that I don't think will be there. But if they somehow fell there, then that probably means there was a run at OT. Byron Murphy's probably gone. Is there a scenario where we're going back to the Marvin days of first round corner?
I mean, I think I'm like always scarred by that. So I always never want to rule it out. I'm like, oh, Drake Kirkpatrick's right around this corner. I know it. But yeah, I don't, I don't think so. Right. There's too many good players. Like, there's too many players that we just talked about. I guess it's always possible that the run happens and it's all falls poorly. I think at that point, I think they'd be more interested in moving back than they would in picking corner. And yeah, there's always a chance. I mean, because those guys are really good, and they aren't exactly totally set there. So there's a possibility of drafting one of those guys if they're there. I'm not going to totally rule that out, but that feels obviously very unlikely, and I think they would be fielding calls if teams were wanting to come up at that point.
Defensive end, I feel the same way about defensive end that I do corner. Like if they did it again this year, it's like, and there are some really good ones, Latu, Jared Verse. But if they go D end at 18, then how much does that guy play? How much does he contribute? What does it mean for Myles Murphy? What does it mean for Sam Hubbard? Like I have all of these questions, and maybe they just make it work, but I don't see it. And I would always, I've said this and people have gotten on me. The tiebreaker to me goes to the offense at 18. And by offense, most of 9 times out of 10, I'm talking about offensive tackle. And I just think that there'll be a tackle there that's close enough to the D end where you lean tackle. Do you agree with that? Or do you think there is the dark horse D end that could make it there?
I don't see a D end. That doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, again, you hate to rule anything out, but I mean, they had gone 2 decades without taking a defensive lineman in the first round before Myles Murphy last year. So let's not forget what they are sort of predisposed to lean away from. They do believe they can find those guys. They don't need a starter. They don't even need a third guy right now. So you're in that, to me, would be a little too off positionally. Speak to me about best player available all you want. They're trying to go win a championship this year. It's the reason they've done what they've done with T. Higgins to this point. So that's a part of this equation. And they have very clear spots that fit them. That would throw a lot of things off that I don't think make much sense. And also because of exactly what you're saying, James, because protect Burrow, make the offense go. You need the next wave of offensive players out of this draft. And to start in a spot that you just addressed last year and have a top of the line guy and solid depth wouldn't make any sense to me, no matter how enticing it would be to talk about guys like you mentioned, Verse or Latu.
That was part 1 of our conversation with Paul Dehner Jr. Make sure you check out The Growler wherever you get your podcasts and right here on YouTube. And stay tuned because we have a conversation about Brock Bowers and when the Bengals should address wide receiver coming up right here on Cincinnati Bengals Talk. As always, thank you so much for watching.